Welcome everyone to the channel. So Jujutsu Kaisen manga is going absolutely insane right now. Yuji and Yuta had Sukuna on the verge of losing, but then their plan failed when Megumi didn't want to get saved after what happened to his sister. So then Sukuna used the same ability he used on Gojo, on Yuta and Yuji, an attack that basically one-shots everyone and apparently cannot be healed. Even Gojo himself couldn't heal from this ability. And keep in mind, Gojo was able to out-heal Sukuna's entire domain. So Sukuna hits Yuta and Yuji with this attack, and in this video, I'll talk about the only way I can see Yuta saving them from this attack, and why the fact that Sukuna is weakened is not going to affect how lethal this attack is going to be. I will also obviously talk about whether Sukuna is finished after getting pierced by Maki's soul-splitting sword, which also by the way cannot be healed, so Sukuna should not be able to heal from this wound. And in a way we're finally gonna get to know what would have happened if Sukuna and Toji fought, which is the biggest coincidence in Jujutsu Kaisen, that Maki and Toji have the exact same power level, and this was stated. But the weirdest part about it is that Maki and Toji have the exact same sword, and it's not like a sword you can just go and buy at a store, so it makes no sense how Toji has it. Maki's sister literally had to sacrifice herself in order for Maki to get this sword, so she didn't get Toji's old sword or anything. It's pretty interesting to me that Gege wanted to copy them that much. But with that said, let's get right into it. I'd like to start off with my weirdest prediction of all time. In my last video, we predicted like 90% of what happened in chapter 251, and I want to talk about how this affects what's gonna happen next. So we begin by getting an explanation on what happened on Sukuna's final finger that was supposedly hidden by Gojo. And Sukuna realizes that the way Yuta copied his curse technique was by eating that final finger. But interestingly, I don't think it's Yuta who actually ate the finger. I think it's more likely that it was Rika who ate the finger. And I will explain why in a little bit. So it seems like Yuta's dismantle didn't do too much to Sukuna. He didn't seem to have sustained any major injuries from his own attack. But Yuji took that moment to jump in and knee Sukuna right in the face. And Sukuna immediately takes advantage of this by holding Yuji, cause as you remember in the previous chapter, it said that in order for Sukuna to get a critical hit on these guys, he had to get direct contact since his output has dropped dramatically. So Sukuna immediately grabs hold of Yuji, and he's getting ready to dismantle Yuji's stomach, and I think he does do some damage, but this is turning out into a blood and guts war, to the point where Yuji just spits in Sukuna's eyes and blinds him with blood. Like, how crazy badass is that? I have to admit, I am loving this fight a lot more than I expected. I thought that when Yuji fights Sukuna, Yuji is gonna get some kind of crazy power up and he's gonna be stronger than Sukuna and Gojo, and he was gonna be able to solo Sukuna easily. But we're seeing that we're getting a realistic fight between Yuji and Sukuna where they're double teaming him and still they're giving absolutely everything in order to get Sukuna. And these fights are probably one of my favorite things about Jujutsu Kaisen. If you remember Kenjaku against Yuki, and even Ryu against Yuta and all those guys, Kashimo against Hakari, all these fights are just absolute wars. And I love that about this series. So Yuji's on the ground looking like he's about to faint from all the blood he's losing. He's coughing up blood and he's saying this is our last chance to defeat Sukuna and get Megumi back. So he's urging himself to heal. And then we're told how Sukuna's cursed energy and cursed output has completely plummeted. Even his control over Megumi's body is getting a lot weaker. And so Yuta and Yuji dive in for their final attacks. But Sukuna decides that he needs to take a gamble, and he releases Hollow Wicker Basket for a split second in order to unleash his world-cutting dismantle. Prepare to endure the full effects of Angel's curse technique. I really have no idea how Sukuna is able to handle even a little bit of it. But if you remember back to the time when Angel did it against Sukuna, Sukuna didn't immediately die on the spot. He was able to take the ability for a few seconds while he was kind of tricking Angel. So Sukuna is doing the same thing here. He's willing to take it for a few seconds in order to unleash that world-cutting slash. But Yuji and Yuta are obviously expecting this, and they grab a hold of all of Sukuna's arms. Rika grabs two of them, and this is a classic 3v1. But it's only fair because Sukuna was doing the exact same thing to Gojo. But this is crazy. Yuta goes to punch Sukuna in the mouth that is on Sukuna's stomach. And then he destroys the mouth on Sukuna's face to make sure Sukuna can't do any chants for that ability. So he can't do hand signs or chants, which is pretty badass. I like when anime fights have like tactical elements like this. So Sukuna desperately tries to push Yuta back, but Yuta realizes that Sukuna's output is completely gone. So then Yuta jumps in for his final attack. And it's at this point that it's revealed to us that Yuji can use blood manipulation, which was quite shocking to me. This was not one of the things I predicted at all. I thought that if Yuji was gonna get an ability, he was gonna get some kind of OP curse technique. I didn't think he would just get the same thing as his brother. But this also takes us back to the time when Yuji said in order to defeat Sukuna he would eat anything. And a lot of people have theorized that Yuji has eaten his cursed womb painting brothers and gained this ability. But that would leave the question of, why do they have the ability naturally from Kenjaku, but Yuji doesn't? Wouldn't Yuji get any inherited technique from his mother or from Kenjaku? Like, you have to consider Yuji's mother had gravitational control, which is absolutely insane. And I think there's still a good chance for Yuji to also get that as well. And it's possible that maybe the soul manipulation or the soul abilities of Yuji are similar to like how Kenjaku is able to take over other people's bodies, even though that's not really soul related. Either that or Yuji's soul abilities are from all the experience he has with Mahito and Sukuna. Because we know Sukuna has dominion over his soul. That's how he was able to destroy Mahito when Mahito tried to touch Sukuna's soul. And speaking of, this is the reason why I think Rika is the one who would eat Sukuna's finger instead of Yuta. Because imagine if Sukuna's final finger was inside of Yuta, and then they destroy all the fingers inside of Megumi's body. Sukuna's spirit would not disappear as long as there's a finger of Sukuna that still remains, and it might be possible that Sukuna would then take over Yuta. But if Rika is the one to eat it, I'll be shocked if Sukuna can become Rika and take over Rika, even though she's the queen of curses and he's the king. And then he went on to show us some flashback of Yuji explaining how, according to Yuki Tsukumo, souls may mix but they can never truly become one. So they talk about all this in their plan to save Megumi, and the main point is that it should be possible to save Megumi. That is what Yuji is explaining to everyone. Yuki Tsukumo specifically wanted to give the soul research to Yuji, which is interesting because, like, why only Yuji? Is it because he has experience with Mahito or Sukuna? I have no idea. But if you consider all the abilities Yuji could potentially have, like the soul abilities, obviously the blood manipulation, and then it was stated that he would get Sukuna's abilities, like the dismantle and the shrine and all of that, not to mention the abilities he can potentially inherit from his mother or Kenjaku. So all of these abilities will make Yuji an absolute unit, and probably second only to Yuta and Gojo in terms of just curse techniques. As I will explain in one of my upcoming videos, Gojo basically has multiple curse techniques in one, and that's why his curse technique is arguably the best in the series, or second best after Yuta's. And Yuta's curse technique to cope, he doesn't keep all the copied curse techniques in his brain. He keeps them with Rika, which makes it possible for him to have so many curse techniques. But if Yuji will get all those other curse techniques, first of all, when, since the series is almost at its end, but also how would he be able to keep all of them in his brain? Even guys like Sukuna can only take maximum 2 or 3 curse techniques before their brains overload, so that's an interesting thing to keep an eye on. So they completely destroy Sukuna and stop him from doing anything. And basically at this point Sukuna had kind of accepted defeat. You can kind of see the defeat on Sukuna's face. Yuta immediately goes for maximum output Jacob's ladder. And then Yuji also goes in for his maximum power soul punch. Sukuna is hit by the maximum output of the Jacob's ladder. So how on earth is Sukuna not completely destroyed right now? Because as you will see, after this Sukuna was still able to do a major attack. So Yuji connects with Sukuna's soul and Megumi's soul. And then Yuji is able to see where Megumi is in the depths of despair. The guy is completely depressed and crushed. And this is one of the things we predicted, that Megumi just will not really have the will to live. And he won't be able to help them. And this is the thing that is going to allow Sukuna to absolutely destroy them when their plan fails. Although I was wrong about the ability that Sukuna would use. I thought Sukuna would use one of his box ability, like the fire arrow or one of those other things. It didn't show that Yuji took the same kind of damage, so if Yuta is defeated here, I can see Sukuna going into a final battle with Yuji, and maybe we see Yuji pull out a domain. I don't know if he's gonna have to learn it on the spot, or they're gonna show us a flashback like, oh, Yuji learned this too. So we could potentially see some blood manipulation domain. And another thing I feel like we're almost certainly gonna see is Yuji spamming black flashes. I hear many people saying that Sukuna is weak against black flash, and that's why we've like never seen Sukuna do a black flash ever. So imagine like Yuji's soul fist mixed with black flash. That could be pretty devastating. But anyway, the next thing we see after they fail to save Megumi, or Megumi just refuses to be saved, we see a chant, dragon scales, repulsion, falling stars. And then Sukuna completely annihilates Yuji and Yuta. Mainly Yuta. They show us Yuta, and it kind of looks like Yuta got cut in a similar way Gojo got cut. So it just cut in half completely. Though to be fair, it's not completely, but it looks like it went all the way through. And this is why I think Sukuna's output being even at 10 or 5% is not going to affect this ability. And that's because it's not going to change the description of the ability. It's not gonna make it so it only cuts half of the world. As long as it cuts everything in the world, it's just gonna cut you. And I think it's possible that the reason why it can't be healed is because it also cuts your soul, since your soul is also in this world. So Yuta looks completely destroyed here. I have no idea how he's going to survive. The only possible way I can see Yuta surviving this, and maybe saving Yuji as well if Yuji took the same kind of attack. Although main characters are so lucky, so I feel like Yuji probably just got his hand cut off and Yuta just got done like Gojo basically. We see Yuta's domain completely destroyed, because I guess Yuta sustained too much damage. So the only way I thought Yuta can potentially save himself and Yuji from this is if Yuta was able to copy this ability from Sukuna. We're seeing that even Rika got absolutely dismantled by this. But there's a lot of theories on how Yuta is able to copy curse techniques. And most of it goes over the fact that Rika has to test the blood of whoever Yuta is trying to copy. And during these last few chapters, we saw Sukuna bleeding everywhere, all over the place. So for sure, if it's about testing someone's blood, then Rika has already tested Sukuna's blood, which would mean that they're able to copy Sukuna's abilities. I don't know how many of his abilities, or maybe they would only just be able to copy the 10 shadows, because this is obviously Megumi's body. So if they can only copy the 10 shadows, I don't know if that's going to offer them much help, unless like Megumi's final Shikigami is something that can really help in this situation. Assuming that Yuta can even copy something like the 10 shadows. And in the scenario that Yuta is able to copy Sukuna's new world-cutting slash, maybe he could somehow cancel it by either sending out another attack at the last second just to cancel out this one, although that sounds a little far-fetched. So possibly he can maybe just neutralize it by just knowing how it works and how it incorporates cursed energy and everything. And maybe he could neutralize it at the last second. Other than that, I feel like Yuta is kinda done at least. They didn't show us Yuji for a good reason. I feel like Yuji is definitely gonna still be good. I don't think Gege can kill off the entire main cast, can he? So I thought that Yuta had to survive, but this chapter is looking pretty tough for Yuta. So if we saw only Maki and Yuji be the one to survive, because I feel like Maki is almost certainly going to survive. And maybe I'll make a video one day explaining why I think Maki is a special case. She's definitely one of Gege's favorite characters, and you know, to be fair, she's probably one of my favorite characters as well. Definitely my favorite female character at least. But Yuta was also one of my favorite characters, so I really hope he doesn't also go. And it seems like Megumi might be done as well. So if Yuji and Maki are the only ones left, then let's just say Yuji's not gonna have any more competition after that. Like at that point they kinda have to end up together, right? Because there's no one else who they can share all the things they've gone through. Even though it seems like they've never really been in any kind of interest between Yuji and Maki like that. I don't even know if Maki is tall like that, if you remember what I mean. And obviously there's also the fact that a lot of people are shipping Yuta and Maki, and some other people are shipping Maki and Megumi since they're kind of similar in terms of like their likes. It was explained to us that they're both dog persons. They're both dog people and all kinds of stuff like that. And their personality is also a little bit similar. My final thought on this is it's possible that we've seen Gege do this before, like characters just dying out of nowhere. So it's completely possible that Maki just ends Sukuna right here with this final attack on Sukuna. And that was literally just the last act. Even the main character goes out like that. Like Gege has shocked us like that with Kenjaku, Gojo and Obara. So if we would see Sukuna, Yuta and Yuji go out right now, I wouldn't be too shocked, but that would be so wild and crazy. Gege did say that it's possible that everyone in the series might just die except one person, but I thought that one person was Yuji. And I've also heard that his other alternative ending was everyone else is alive but Yuji dies. But since a lot of people have already died, we know that's not the ending Gege went for. And then it literally tells us a surprise attack against an opponent, certain of victory. But in this case, I'm not sure if the person who's certain of victory is Maki or Sukuna, who thought that it was over and he had won. So if this was just a regular sword, Sukuna would just heal and he'd be completely fine. And then we would have Maki against Sukuna now, which would kind of be like Toji versus Sukuna that we never really got. But this is a soul splitting sword that is supposed to be able to cut your soul completely. But regardless of this, as I've said, I think Sukuna has dominion over his soul. And he might be the only character in the series who's able to heal his soul. And this is why I think Maki should have gone for Sukuna's head completely. Or don't just stab him, like cut him in half or something. Like you had a completely wide opening where Sukuna had no idea you're there. But instead Maki is so sure of her victory, I guess, that she decides to stab Sukuna instead. So we saw that Sukuna has some level of control. He was able to deny Mahito access to Sukuna's soul. Basically almost get completely destroyed when he tries to touch Sukuna's soul. And I believe there's a lot of knowledge about the soul and just jujutsu that Sukuna has and knows that no one else does. So I think it's completely possible that weapons like this soul-splitting katana and all this stuff, it just doesn't work on Sukuna because he's just so knowledgeable and he knows about all of that stuff. So it's definitely going to be very fascinating to see what happens next. And yeah, this is one of the things I completely predicted, that Maki would just be there waiting to finish Sukuna off. But it's possible that Sukuna is still going to use that trump card, because when he was fighting Gojo, it was stated that Sukuna has some kind of trump card and that's why they can't all jump him at once. And we've also seen some abilities of Sukuna that have not been explained yet. So this is why I think this is not the end for Sukuna. But these were my thoughts on the chapter, as well as some predictions on what's gonna happen in the next chapter. Drop a sub if you liked the video, and thanks for watching. See you in the next one.